CVPA student here at the University of Massachusetts. I've known Leslie since last year, when I noticed that she's been doing amazing work, not only in regard with her own projects and her own work here at UMass Dartmouth, but also with the community in downtown New Bedford. And with that introduction, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and her work more. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you guys for having me here. As Pamela said, I'm a third year. This is my final year in graduate studies here at UMass. Record that. Yeah. Leslie Macklin, third year graduate student. This is my final year. I'm in my thesis work. And art and sustainability is an issue that's always been really important to me. It hasn't always taken such a huge part of my work as it does now, but I'm really happy to take the time to share with you just a brief overview of the history of art and sustainability, both where it starts and where it is today, and then how I use it in my own work and in the community. So it really all starts with this question for me, not only is what is the relationship between sustainability and art, but more importantly, why is it important? And I think in answering this question, or starting to think about this question, it's really helpful to set up a definition so that we can all sort of be on the same page as far as what we're talking about when we use the word sustainability. Depending on the context, it seems like the word can mean a variety of things. And in art, I really believe it sets up a relationship pertaining to the dynamic balance with others in the environment and creating a harmony among differences. And I chose this definition because it's both a statement of a common goal, that there's striving for balance, with a call to action in creating harmony amongst our differences. And artists who think about sustainability are all responding to an overall disconnectedness between the political, the economic, the social, the ecological, and the environmental aspects of culture and society. So historically, sustainability wasn't a word that was thrown around that often. It really started with the word ecology. And that came around in the mid-60s with this word Earthworks. Are any of you familiar with the term Earthworks? And land art and environmental art. And so I just wanted to set up some definitions to sort of separate those out and see where they've gone from the 60s up through today. Earthworks are primarily permanent, large-scale, non-natural forms sited in open spaces as opposed to a particular natural environment or urban setting. This is a really important definition because in the 60s, artists were starting what's considered the institutional critique, questioning what's the value of keeping art within galleries and museums. Also at the same time, culturally, we're getting the first images back from satellites in space and getting to look at the Earth from that distance. It's a time during the Vietnam War, there's the threat of nuclear war, and there's the danger, people are worried about population explosion, and so there's just this overall cultural awareness of the delicacy of the environment. And this history is very brief. You could teach a whole semester on the relationship between art and sustainability. So I'm just going to give you a few cornerstone artists in this conversation. And the artist most well known with earthwork and land art is Robert Smithson. This is his spiral jetty. It's in Utah. It was built in 1970. And Smithson really is moving the earth here in a way that artists haven't before. But I want to emphasize that, this movement didn't really start with the idea of sustainability as we know it now, where we're conserving materials and thinking about where things are coming from. Smithson is not necessarily taking an ecological viewpoint in the creation of this work. He has a really great quote from an interview where he's claiming that artists should not clean up the mess left by industry. Art is an arena to critically discuss ecological issues. Art can become a resource that mediates between ecologists and industrialists. And while he worked in degraded sites, He wanted to really have the work bring a dialogue to the damage that's more visible, rather than attempting a redemption of the site, which is what which is a more contemporary notion of what sustainability and art do together. The terms land art and environmental art sort of become an umbrella terminology for applying to any work that activates the land. It uses nature as the medium. It aims to enhance viewers' awareness of natural forces, processes, and phenomena, or to demonstrate a cultural awareness of nature. And so Smithson's work, his Earthworks, fall under that umbrella term, as do artist Michael Heiser. This is his work Double Negative in Nevada in 1969. He moved 250,000 tons of dirt to create this crevice in the landscape. And if you think about how we think about sustainability today, where, how much energy and fossil fuels went into the actual creation of this artwork, we may not necessarily have associated it in this discussion in ecology. In fact, the artist himself is quoted in this piece saying, "I don't really care about the landscape. I'm a sculptor. Real estate is dirt and dirt is material." Kind of re-emphasizing this definition that land art uses nature as a medium, but not necessarily talking about the ecology of our culture. Which brings us to the last definition of eco-art, or ecology art. It considers the issues of sustainability, adaptability, interdependence, renewable resources, and biodiversity, but again, does not necessarily attempt to transform the local ecology. There are a lot of artists in the 60s and 70s that experimented with this new field of environmental art, but eco-art is a separate entity. It evolved during the same time period, but artists working ecologically are realizing the potential of environmental art to advocate social change. And artists see themselves as not isolated from the world, but a catalytic part of the system. And so that's really what got things going. Hans Hack is sort of this hybrid artist between the environmental artist and the ecological artist. In this work, it's Condensation Wall. It's a plexiglass rectangular prism. Inside is simply water, and the environment it's in is a warm room with a lot of light. So this piece is simply the process of condensation and evaporation over and over again. And it's a work that's using natural materials, but to highlight the cyclical nature of biological systems and the interconnectedness of the environment into that cycle. It's a very simple expression, but he's relating it to the functionality of our social organizations. And the final cornerstone artist in the emergence of this ecological art is Joseph Beuys and his idea of social sculpture. This is a piece called 7,000 Oaks that he installed over 8 or 9 years in Germany. What happens is when they were first installing it, the trees were very small. Let's see, go back. And you can see next to the trees there are little boulders. And when the piece first went up, the trees were smaller than the boulders. And then at some point, the trees were the same height as the boulders. And then now today, they're much larger and overpowering it. And so through this piece, he's critiquing modern industrial civilization and its expansive growth and calling for the development of urban ecology policies, but at the same time, to go through the feat of planting 7,000 trees really takes the activation of the community, and this idea of the social sculpture. As a quote from Beuys, social sculpture is a way to reshape and restructure society according to the understanding that every human being is an artist, and by utilizing the healing and transformative powers of art in the lives of individuals and in the lives of communities, large and small. So that brings us up to today. We've seen how ecology started as just moving the land, evolving into maybe it can have ecological concerns, to now it's actually about mobilizing communities. So today it's used in urban planning, in site reclamation, in ecological restoration, in upcycling and repurposing, and there are still artists using natural materials to create art in nature. Andy Goldsworthy would be an example of that. To highlight some of these, some contemporary artists using eco-artists, John Dawson, he goes along the oceans and collects trash and creates paintings with them. This one here is all plastic bags, and over on the right it's just found rope from marinas. This would be an example of upcycling and repurposing. You've got Patricia Johansson. Excuse me. She's an urban planner and artist. In her work, she aims to perform multiple functions. She wants cultural, structural, social, and environmental. She wants this. In this work, she rehabilitated a large body of water in the middle of the city in Dallas, Texas. So here, in the urban planning stage, artists are using their creativity to revitalize an entire area and thinking about how the city is actually going to be interacting with this new space that is made available to them. Aviva Ramani is a great example of how you can reclaim a site and restore it. Her projects will take 10 years, often have budgets of $500,000 and cover like 10.5 hectares. This is her Blue Rocks site. She worked with scientists and engineers to really reclaim, clean up, revegetate, create wave barriers in this Blue Rock site. There's an eco-artist, Shelley Sachs, that I think really says it well, in that the contemporary eco-artist is perceiving the interrelationships. They're joined up thinking and practice, and they're enabling a connective understanding through their work. So there are plenty of earthwork artists that are adopting the ideas of eco art, James Turrell, Andy Goldsworthy, Suzanne Lacey. It's a really long list, and I would encourage you to go to greenmuseum.org if you're interested in the wide range of artists working today. But to get back to this fundamental question, really, why is the relationship between sustainability and art important? And for me, I think it widens the aesthetic experience to include a more participatory and social interactive framework for art. In this way, artists can advocate for shared spaces and ecosystems by fostering creativity, ownership, and empowerment in the community, rather than acting as the owner of creative impetus. Sustainability in art really put an emphasis on the importance of collaboration and artists' role within the process of social change. And so I think this is especially topical in your all's conversation about the post-industrial society and these communities that are in need of revitalization, and how projects like these contemporary artists have just showed, as well as the things that I'm doing, make this revitalization feasible. I don't really have a linear practice. I practice sustainability in the arts through several ways. I aim for social critique through my personal studio work. I spend a lot of time directly interacting with youth in community projects, and I recently co-wrote a National Endowment for the Arts grant to create a dialogue in the New Bedford community centered around the creation of public art. This summer I was a Ladue Fellow. I went to Fall River, this is North Park, This is their skate park. They're just over the hill. They rebuilt a middle school, and the city asked me to come in and do something about the fact that there was all of this graffiti and profanity so close to where all of these middle school children would be playing. So I worked with the children over the summer that were going to be going to school there. I'm not from Fall River. I'm originally from Missouri, so I'm not even from the South Coast. So I really wanted to hear what their concerns were. I wanted to hear their voice, and I wanted their voice to be infused in however we were going to revitalize the park. So the first week I printed out a map of Fall River, and we identified what we liked and what we didn't like about the city. Most of them didn't really like it at all. There wasn't a lot of likes. I didn't know that they don't even have a movie theater in Fall River. So I felt there's a little empathy that I had for those kids. Most of them wanted to leave. And so as the summer sort of boiled down, we ended up only having 2 hours to create like this 40-yard mural. But I let the kids choose positive postures and negative postures that they wanted to communicate to the community. We talked a lot about silhouettes and the power of anonymity in having a voice. And so they created these silhouettes, stencils, spray painted, and behind the negative gestures that they did not want to see in their community, we put these behind the stencil of a chain link fence, and the positive gestures are not behind the fence. So that's sort of a scope, and we had 2 hours to do this whole long wall, retaining wall. There's a project started by, let me get her name, Candy Chang in New Orleans after the hurricane, and she put this wall up called Before I Die, ... and it's become like a huge sensation. There's a lot of cities doing it everywhere, and it's pretty self-explanatory. She puts it up, Before I Die, and then the community is invited to come and give their feedback. And so the next part of the skate park project is to do something very similar. It's what you saw there was how it looked by the end of the summer, and next spring I'll be going back with the kids to do a similar project to the Before I Die to add on to this mural that asks what they would change about their city, because I think it's an important component, because this wall was clearly beforehand a place where people felt they could have a voice about the things that they didn't like about their city. And so I want to bring this format into this project as well and just see what happens, because I visited like a month ago, and it's already started to accumulate little additions to the conversation, some graffiti. So that was that project, still in progress. The grant that I took place, or co-wrote, is to bring public art to New Bedford. New Bedford doesn't have a whole lot of public art, and the Acushnet River, as some of you may know, is a Superfund cleanup site, heavily polluted from PCBs in the 70s. So what our grant does is not solely to pay for public art, but actually to create a platform for community engagement and bringing an artist into the community to research the community, to learn from the community, and to get the community to be a part of the art making process. And the aim has been that through public forums of the public, we will have public forums where the public will actually get to choose the sites for the artwork. They'll get to choose what artwork is finally displayed. They'll get to watch the artwork go up. And then the artists will be going and interacting with youth in their schools about the project and the issues that the project is bringing up. So to get the community involved in the art making process and engage them in those issues, I think is a lot more powerful way to mobilize community pride rather than just to stick up art and say, okay, now you kind of figured out this is your thing that you have to live with. Now they're actually engaged in the whole process of it. This is an example of one of the artists who submitted as a part of the grant. Stacy Levy, Pink Wedge Water Level, Springville, PA. She's a perspective artist. But it's a really simple idea, like where will the water level rise to? And it's made with simple materials. So we envision the community will be able to help her actually create the artwork if it were something along these lines. It's not that complex to wrap some trees in pink ribbon. So that's the public grant. We won't hear about that until April. And moving on from there is my own personal artwork. I live in New Bedford. I walk the streets of New Bedford every day. And I'm really interested and fascinated by all of the wrought ironwork in the city. I think it's really beautiful, but as I'm moving through it, I've noticed that a lot of it is really in disrepair. It's not cared for. I started to think a lot more about why it's that way, and where it is repaired, I don't know if you can tell from this image, it's been cheaply repaired. These are the new ones, and those are the old ones in the end. It's been cheaply repaired like this, or it's been even more sort of MacGyvered together. This one with the chain link fence. And so these all sort of inspired my most recent piece. And I know when you're a visual artist and a fine artist, your images are everything. Matt, you know this. I just finished this piece last week and haven't had a chance to get a great image of it, so this is sort of what it is. It comes to about right here. It's a full-scale wrought iron fence made out of ceramic material. And my aim here is to objectify the economic and cultural boundaries within the city of New Bedford. Though I think the conversation could be cast nationally. I think these fences are an everyday reminder of the wealth of the city's past and the economic boundaries between the cheap labor that built them, the labor force which is now depleted in the city. It's made more evident in the disrepair of these fences, and even more so by the cheap attempts to repair them. Socially, I think these moments where the barriers have been broken speak to the necessity of a leveling of the economic inequality within the community. The fact that it's made out of ceramic, for me, speaks to the fragility of the status quo in which the future of these post-industrial economies is uncertain. And I tend to anthropomorphize a lot of my surroundings, and so beyond the social critique, I think you can also see the human condition in moments like these. So I didn't touch on it a lot, but the repurposing and upcycling aspect to sustainable practice is really available to you all as makers here in New Bedford. I didn't use it in that last work, but I will often go out and I have a truck. I will fill the truck with really interesting old things that I find on the street, take them back to the studio, and they'll just sit there until I decide to make a piece with them. And I just wanted to give you a little tour of New Bedford where you can find these things if it's something that you're interested in. The New England Demolition and Salvage over on Cove Street is an amazing building. Has anyone been there? Show of hands. Okay, well this is a 2-story old mill building. It does have a little antique section in it, but it's where sort of old architectural things go to find their second life or die, depending on how you look at it. They have thousands of doors and windows and doorknobs all coming out of these old homes that are being remodeled or torn down in some cases. Their second floor is filled with hundreds of tubs and bath fixtures, and it's just a wonderful delight if that's your thing and that's what you're into. Next door to it, there are several vacant lots just ready for you to go pick up bricks and lumber. Walking around any of these old mill buildings, you'll find where the bricks have fret and started to fall apart, and we'll just collect wonderful material that's free for the picking. This is behind the salvage place. You want to go there and get as much wonderful free, probably asbestos-coated wood, but wear a mask and gloves, you'll be fine. This is just around the corner, again from that Cove Street place. Cody and Coven New Steel is on the north end, and this is like a little peek of what they have to offer. You just go in there with some gloves, and the way out, whatever you find, they have. I know it looks sort of like a garbage heap, and it is, but there's treasures in there for you to find and use. And if you just circulate around the waterfront on the north end, you'll find all sorts of illegal dumping grounds. This was one of my favorites until they put this fence up a year ago, but you can still get behind the fence, and I would encourage you to all look behind the fences, because you never know what you'll find. This is what's behind that fence. Just all kinds of fun building materials. Okay, I think that's it. Does anyone have any questions or want me to talk like a little further about any particular subject or topic or project?
What was the third one?
It's on Cove, so the New Bedford Antique Place is on Cove Street, and you can get to it by going down 18. You hang a left onto Cove Street, and then there's an outer road, like pretty much immediately left. And then you take the next right, and it's down that road.
All right.
But if you walk around that area, you'll find it. Taking yourself on a bike around all of these old mill buildings is, you're gonna find all kinds of cool stuff. And then find somebody with a truck. Okay, you're gonna let me off easy, no brain busters?
Come on, more questions for Leslie. Leslie, what about health issues? Like, aren't you concerned about, I noticed that you mentioned, it's necessary to wear gloves while you're dealing with these materials, but are there any other tips that you can offer to us when we approach these sites?
Just make sure to come prepared with a mask, with boots, with gloves, with a really good excuse for why you're there. Spring and summer, this is getting down to the little nitty-gritty of what you want to make stuff out of this, but spring and fall are great times for people to do their home rehabs. So you'll see those great 20-ton dumpsters out front of places. I will frequently stick my head over and go through those as well. With the construction debris, I've had homeowners sort of come home at the same time that I'm in their dumpster, and so you should have a pocket of excuses of why you're in there doing your thing. Just be as honest and friendly about it as possible. And then some of these sites do have posted, hey, please don't trespass. And so, proceed with caution on those sites. But I do find Sunday afternoons are the best. Yeah.
You talked about Earthworks, but what are they?
Okay, Earthworks are...
Is it like that?
It's like the spiral jetty. It's like the negative space. They're these powerful through these moments when artists have really moved the earth to create some sort of sculptural expression. There are, like I said, these were just keystone people. There are other works, let's see, what's her name? Nancy Ross created the sun tunnels. Maybe you've seen those. Have you guys taken like a contemporary survey of where she put out these large cement tunnels that have holes in them that key into constellations, and so as the sun's passing over them, the constellation is moving through the tube, and it's really to break up the land and move it.
But I think, Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but I think that this was predominantly a response to the institutions
Yes.
that supported art and institutions that exhibited art. They wanted to go beyond the borders or beyond the walls of museums and galleries.
Yes, that's the institutional critique was like a huge.
Absolutely.
It's a huge deal. There's a whole book called Institutional Critique where artists are questioning, does art only belong in museums, only belong in the galleries? And so it is a response to that, but also, like I said, a response to the fact that they had all these wonderful satellite images and could see the potential of making things at that scale. A lot of it, if you read into like the concept behind it, talks about the relationship to the constellations and the stars, and there's an observatory. Who made that observatory? Was it Donald Judd? It was.
Was it Donald Judd?
It was. Let's see. Robert Morris had that observatory. Yeah.
But then again, it's important to emphasize that indirectly they influenced the future artists who were interested in the environment, who were interested
Yes,
in
because it's creating art in this public realm at the scale where people can really interact with it on an everyday level. They don't have to go into the museum. It's like interrupting like vernacular space, and from there, like I said, these things don't necessarily have the sustainability ideas behind it that we think of today, in the sense of maybe we shouldn't spend all that time and money to move all these rocks unless it's actually going towards cleaning up this waterway. And so there's where the Smithson is coming in saying, well, it's not my responsibility to clean it up, I'm just showing you that this problem here exists, and let's have a conversation about it. And plenty of artists still do that today. It's not, like I said, eco art is not necessarily, you don't have to go out there and collaborate with the scientists and figure out how your sculpture is going to generate energy or clean a waterway, but it's just another category of artwork and what artwork can be considered.
Leslie, I wanted to tell you that a lot of the projects that we are producing in this class are actually at the level of proposal. So they're just presentations of an idea that could be materialized if there was funding, if there was support, and so on and so forth. Now, could you give us some tips about the process of your thinking process? How do you really come up with your ideas? How do you present them for yourself and then for your audiences? And then from there, I understand that it's a big jump to go from there to making the actual thing, which requires a lot of work and energy and time. But that process of the development of the idea or the development of the proposal, could you please talk to us a little bit?
Well, they're a little different depending on whether I'm focused on my studio work or on the community-based work. The studio work is a lot of intense research on subjects that I personally find really interesting and engaging, and The community-based works are really a lot more about collaboration. In the North Park project, it started with a need. I think the creativity that artists can bring to a need in a community, or a gap in a community, or somewhere where you see that there's a disconnection, is really important. They needed somebody to come in and revitalize that park. So the park itself is actually really historically significant. It's a Olmsted Park. This is the guy that designed the Central Park in New York City. So it's something that the city of Fall River has decided to preserve. And so it's known as the Park of Seven Hills, and so I bring little things like that into the design motif. You know, like it had the background of that mural were these 4 different colors of hill, and then you start with large ideas of what something can be, and then you have to work within the parameters. You know, like I had 2 hours. Like you have your big idea of what you want it to be, and then you have your 2 hours and your 5 kids, and they only know how to use. They don't really know how to use X-Acto knives, so you have to learn to teach them how to cut their stencils. And I guess even before that, I'm not the type that's going to step into a community and tell it what I think it needs. Like, I had to collaborate with those kids and understand what issues were important to them. And I met with the head of the police department there to find out what were gang symbols and gang colors, because I didn't want to end up designing something. I didn't want the kids to pull fast one on me just because they don't know the area that well. So again, collaboration. I had a photographer come in and work with the kids to create the silhouettes that you see there. So a lot of collaboration.
Wonderful. This is a beautiful project, Leslie. Did it get attention in the media?
Yeah, I think somebody wrote an article on it in Fall River. But it's still, in my mind, not finished. I want that extra component there to it. Because it's really about, it's really a place for the community's voice to be heard. And I want it to be more constructive than like profanities spray painted all over it. That's why I'm thinking, well, if I can adapt what this Before I Die project, it's had so much good publicity and good reception to the public areas in which it is installed, and it's been installed in a lot of different places. To bring that to here and just see what happens.
Any other questions for Leslie? Leslie, I wanted you to also talk to us a little bit about the books that you read and the sources that you use in order to create your own art. Could you please talk to us a little bit about that?
Wow, in my own artwork, I wish I had known. I would have brought you a little big list. The International Sculpture Center just put out a new book about socially engaged art and art in public. I read a lot of history. I do with the JSTOR art. You guys utilize the JSTOR stuff and finding using your keywords to look up scholarly publishing. If you're interested in art and sustainability, there's a really great book called Art and Sustainability that was published last year. It's very, very current.
I think that's the one that we studied in this class, right? We had a chapter from that in this class.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's very up to date.
It's very up to date and it's very comprehensive. And where it's not, the author actually tells you, hey, I'm being pretty vague here. If you're interested more in this subject, you should keep going. The Whitechapel books, I think that's also on your syllabus, the Ruins one. They're put out by MIT Press. They all have a theme, like ruins or painting or color or
Yeah, we have studied several chapters.
failure.
Yeah, they're great.
They're a great anthology. I really like anthologies because you can find it's 50 authors in one book, and then if you like one of them, you can go out and get their full text.
But you do really study a lot before getting into the studio and actually doing it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's
So that's part of the learning.
research is like a really fundamental part in art making. Art making is not just showing up and making something for just because you feel like it.
And especially this kind of art making
Yeah.
that has less to do with your personal desires and your personal feelings than the community and people and the environment. Things that are not necessarily you. They're out there and you have to
But they are me as well. Like there's I don't think I could do it successfully if I wasn't attached to it personally in some way.
Excellent. That's a very good point. Leslie, I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity of the 8 minutes that we have left here and show you some of the sketches that students in this class have done. So students work in groups of 5. This is group 4, doing these sketches for their project. And in this particular assignment, they were asked to highlight the aspects of the work that deal with issues of, urban farming, plants, growth of vegetation in their site, and so on and so forth. So what they did was that they took photographs and then they projected their own ideas on top of these photographs of the site by drawing on them. What do you think of that, this mode of presentation?
Oh, that's great. That's actually how public art proposals are generally made. People on juries considering what you want to do want to actually see how it's going to interact with the space. So I've done a couple proposals for public art, and this is exactly how I would do it, by actually superimposing my ideas right on top of the photo of the work. I think it's a great idea.
Wonderful. And then, this is a kind of thing that you need to, do you usually, when you, for example, work for a public institution, do you submit your portfolio, or do you go there and physically, make yourself available to them and make a presentation there? How would you present your ideas?
It depends on the call, actually. Sometimes they want to just see your portfolio before they will ever, of things that you've already accomplished, before you will ever even get a chance to submit your actual idea for them. And sometimes there's general calls saying, this is our space, this is our budget, what can you do for us? And that's when you would put together something like this. But if creating these sorts of projects is your thing, you can also create just a portfolio of ideas that you would then submit when they're asked, if you don't have a lot of experience in implementing them. And on projects like that, you would want to have made a relationship with somebody that does have a lot of experience and have them sign on as a mentor for the project.
That's a very good idea.
Yeah. So.
Any other questions for us? Leslie, the grant that you were talking about, the grant for downtown New Bedford, could you tell us what grant is it?
It's called the Earthworks grant. It's from the National Endowment for the Arts. That's the money that the government gives for the creation of artwork, and it can be performance, it can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be visual public art. And they give grants up to $100,000, and like last year they funded 800 projects.
Wow. Do you have to be affiliated with an institution in order to be eligible to apply?
For the Artworks grant, that's the one we did,
Okay.
but you do not have to. They have other ones for individual artists.
Individual artists.
Yes.
So
But
that's good to
they're
know.
highly competitive, but what's really great about the NEA at least is that if you're not accepted, they will spend 30 minutes with you to say why you weren't accepted, which I think is probably one of the most valuable tools that you could have, is to say why, how you can improve for the next time.
That's wonderful. On the NEA grant side, do they have samples of successful proposals?
They actually list everything that they funded, but they don't have their proposals. They have, so as part of our proposal, we had to submit a description, a project description, and that is what goes onto their website to say what they've funded. So you can see the range of projects that they've funded. They've done a lot of different projects, from setting up bee sanctuaries to public art to funding performances to funding conferences. Just a lot of different things, as long as you fit their guidelines. And they have seven pages of guidelines that our grant had to fit within. So they're.
And so, Leslie, as a student, I think the best way to go about, applying for these grants is to collaborate with your professors. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. My advisor is a co-writer. Pamela read for us and gave a lot of great suggestions. We worked with the grants office at the university, and we also worked with the Ladue Center for Civic Engagement, who's a partner on the project, as well as Buzzards Bay Coalition, the Working Waterfront, the Artworks, the AHA Night. There are a couple other partners in it, but I had to physically go out and make a connection with all of those people to bring them on as partners. So that's a large part of, where are your palette gardens going? Do you have permission from the people that are, using that building? If so, how do you get that permission? A lot of times it's just going in and asking.
Or getting a letter of support from them to include it as part of your grant.
Yeah.
So, the bottom line is that even as a student, you do have a lot of opportunities outside the resources that this campus can offer to you. You can collaborate with your professors, you can collaborate with professional artists in the area in order to get funding for your ideas. And I think that some of the ideas, Leslie, that students are proposing for dilapidated buildings and vacant buildings in downtown New Bedford are really amazing, and I think that they're grantable ideas.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone attend the Pioneers Festival that was this past weekend? Okay, great. Was there any value in that for you guys?
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot, I noticed there wasn't a lot necessarily about post-industrial city. It seemed to be highly focused on agriculture and farming this year.
There was one lecture by Bill Strickland on Friday morning that I thought was really interesting, and that was about how he started an art school in his hometown, which is really, really poor, and so unprivileged people usually tend to think they don't deserve nice things, and so he made this really, really beautiful building in the middle of this just city that just has no money, and he got Heinz ketchup. They gave him $1 million if he would include culinary part of his art school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just he was about education and inspiring that cities that are poor don't necessarily have to mean that those people can't succeed, and that's what he does. He takes those kids and he shows them you can have nice things. It doesn't always mean that it has to be expensive, and he does that through art classes, and that was really inspiring.
Excellent. And where city? Which city?
Well, he has a bunch of different schools all over he's trying to do like one at least in every state. But his, I believe it was Pittsburgh was the first one.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And I mean, he has a book called Make the Impossible Possible. And he was actually a really good lecturer. He was really funny.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you attended that. Leslie, one last question before we finish this class. Leslie, in this class, as you might know, we are reading a variety of things, like some from urban planning, some from public art, some about theory, some about architecture. Do you think it's a good way of nourishing our knowledge about these issues to go into these different disciplines?
I think the more diverse your knowledge, the more valuable you are, because again, we're living in a very disconnected society. So the more diverse you are, the better you're going to be at making the connections. Which is, while I'll read a book on how to make your own cheese in the same week that I will the history of wrought iron. You just never know what you're going to be able to connect between these things to make the society function better. So, it was a random